As this steam train cuts across the lush Indian landscape, it leaves behind an undeniable physical mark on the continent. The British Empire laid thousands of miles of track just like this across the subcontinent. How did the exact systems built to deploy imperial troops and extract wealth become the very tools used by the colonizers to overthrow their colonizers? The history of colonial rule is rarely a simple binary. In India, brutal economic extraction and rapid, sweeping modernization were deeply and uncomfortably intertwined. To manage, study, and drain the wealth of such a massive landmass, the British required highly efficient systems. They could not rule an area of that size without a modern administrative bureaucracy and an expansive physical infrastructure. In their quest to build the ultimate machinery of absolute control, the British unwittingly laid the foundational infrastructure for India's independence. The primary motivation for colonial infrastructure was entirely extractive. The empire needed to move military units swiftly to crush local dissent, and they needed to transport raw materials from the deep interior directly to coastal ports. Look at this massive steel cantilever structure dominating the Hooghly River. Projects like the Howrah Bridge, linking Calcutta to its surrounding regions, were physical symbols of this extractive control. Yet an unintended reality emerged. These vast railway and road networks physically connected distant, diverse regions of the subcontinent for the first time in its history. Because of this physical integration, people could engage in domestic trade, travel easily between provinces, and exchange ideas at a pace that was entirely impossible before the tracks were laid. Forcing physical connectivity onto the land slowly transformed historically isolated regional populations into a unified, connected populace. A similar dynamic played out on the intellectual front. Operating out of this imposing neoclassical building, British Orientalist scholars established institutions like the Asiatic Society to study India's ancient languages and heritage, largely to understand their subjects well enough to rule them. These researchers documented, translated, and preserved works like this ancient handwritten Sanskrit manuscript, saving vital texts on mathematics, science, and philosophy. They established the Archaeological Survey of India, an organization mandated to systematically document, excavate, and protect ancient monuments and stupas across the country. However, the line between documenting history and exploiting it was frequently erased. As this map shows, while sites were preserved, the artifacts found within them followed lines that flowed directly away from their origins and into the glass display cases of European museums. Ancient history was theoretically saved from the decay of time, while simultaneously being stolen from the people who created it under the guise of protection. Before colonial rule, learning occurred in diverse, local settings, like this traditional outdoor courtyard school, known as a pathshala. The colonial government actively dismantled this localized system in favor of a rigid, centralized English medium curriculum. The British objective behind this educational reform was entirely practical. They wanted to manufacture a massive class of English-speaking, loyal Indian clerks to manage the lower tiers of their rapidly expanding bureaucracy. They did not anticipate the intellectual consequences. Studying an English curriculum meant reading English political philosophy, which accidentally exposed a new generation of Indians to Western Enlightenment concepts of liberty, democracy, and equality. Combine those new political concepts with the parallel introduction of the commercial printing press, and you have the hardware necessary to mass-produce subversive ideas. By attempting to format the minds of their subjects for strict obedience, the British inadvertently provided the exact vocabulary and communication platforms needed to demand freedom. Over time, Indian nationalists began weaponizing the colonizers' own systems to orchestrate the independence movement. Notice the crowd occupying the space around this steam locomotive. Independence leaders hijacked the vast railway network to travel massive distances, mobilize enormous crowds, and build a cohesive national front. They used the colonial printing presses to bypass British censors, aggressively circulating revolutionary newspapers and anti-colonial literature across regional borders. Those ancient historical texts translated by British scholars were reclaimed by Indian intellectuals. They used that documented history to forge a proud, unified national identity, proving their civilization possessed a rich heritage long before the empire arrived. The empire's sophisticated mechanisms of absolute control ultimately provided the precise network required to dismantle it. Today, the colonial contradictions still physically and culturally shapes modern India. Modern domestic infrastructure planning continues to rely heavily upon trade and transit routes that were originally drawn specifically for colonial resource extraction. We still see fiery international debates over museum ethics, heritage conservation, and the mounting demands from formerly colonized nations for the repatriation of their stolen artifacts. When we look at artifacts in foreign museums today, we have to ask, who truly owns history? Can technological progress and modernization ever be truly separated from the exploitative political context that created it?